The space station, called Waypoint 7, floated in the darkness between stars. It was old and forgotten, a place where broken ships stopped for repairs, and tired workers counted the days until they could go home. Most people in the galaxy did not even know it existed. That was exactly how Park Tae-ho liked it. Tae-ho worked the night shift in the maintenance section. He fixed air filters, repaired water pipes, and kept the life support systems running. It was quiet work, lonely work, and he preferred it that way. He was 32 years old, with tired eyes and rough hands covered in small scars from years of hard labor. He rarely smiled, rarely talked, and never complained. Tonight, he was alone in Section D, the oldest part of the station. The lights flickered here, and the walls made strange sounds when the metal expanded and contracted. Most workers refused to enter Section D, but Tae-ho did not mind. The silence was peaceful. The broken machines needed him, and he understood them better than he understood people. He was elbow-deep inside an air filtration unit when his radio crackled to life. "All personnel, attention," the station commander's voice said. He sounded nervous, which was unusual. "We have unexpected visitors. A Volari diplomatic vessel has requested emergency docking. Everyone is ordered to maintain professional conduct. I repeat, maintain professional conduct." Tae-ho paused his work. The Volari were one of the most powerful species in the galaxy. Their empire stretched across hundreds of worlds, and their technology was far beyond anything humans had created. Relations between humans and the Volari were tense, not hostile, but not friendly either. Humans were still new to the galactic community, still proving themselves, still being watched and judged. Why would a Volari ship stop at a forgotten station like this? Tae-ho shrugged and returned to his work. It was not his concern. He was just a mechanic. Whatever important things happened with diplomats and commanders, they happened far above his level. He would fix his machines and stay out of the way. An hour passed, then 2. Through the station's internal network, Tae-ho heard fragments of conversation. The Volari ship had engine problems. They were waiting for replacement parts. There was royalty on board, a princess and her young son. The station commander was sweating through his uniform, trying to keep everything perfect. Tae-ho finished the air filter and moved to the next task. A water recycler in the abandoned cargo bay needed attention. He gathered his tools and walked deeper into Section D, where the corridors grew darker and the silence grew heavier. The cargo bay was massive and empty. Old containers lined the walls covered in dust. The water recycler sat in the corner, making unhealthy grinding sounds. Tae-ho knelt beside it and opened the access panel. Rust and worn parts. Simple problems with simple solutions. He was reaching for his wrench when he heard something strange. Footsteps. Small footsteps, running. Tae-ho turned and saw a child standing in the doorway of the cargo bay. But this was not a human child. This child had pale blue skin that seemed to glow softly in the dim light. His eyes were large and violet, filled with curiosity and excitement. He wore clothes made of fabric that shimmered like liquid silver. A Volari child, the prince. The boy saw Tae-ho and froze. For a moment, they stared at each other. Then the child smiled, a bright, innocent smile that crossed all species and ran further into the cargo bay, exploring the old containers with wonder. Tae-ho stood slowly. This was bad. This was very bad. If something happened to this child, if he got hurt or lost, it would become an incident. Humans would be blamed. Relations would suffer. "Hey," Tae-ho called out, keeping his voice soft and calm. "Little one, you should not be here." The child did not understand his words. He laughed and climbed onto a stack of containers, reaching for a control panel on the wall. His small fingers touched the buttons with innocent curiosity. Tae-ho's blood went cold. That panel controlled the emergency systems for this section. It was old, broken, disconnected from the main safety network. If the child pressed the wrong button, The child pressed the wrong button. Alarms screamed to life. Red lights flashed. A deep groaning sound filled the cargo bay as ancient mechanisms activated. On the far wall, a section of hull plating began to shift. Tejo watched in horror as a crack appeared, widening, and the terrible sound of escaping air filled his ears. Hull breach. Atmosphere venting. The child screamed as the wind pulled at him. He fell from the containers and hit the ground hard. A heavy metal beam, shaken loose by the breach, crashed down and pinned his small body to the floor. He cried out in pain and fear, his violet eyes wide with terror. Tejo did not think. He did not calculate. He simply moved. The air was already growing thin, rushing toward the crack in the hull. Every breath became harder. His ears popped, his vision blurred at the edges. He had maybe 2 minutes before the section lost all atmosphere. Maybe less. He ran to the child and dropped to his knees. The beam was heavy, too heavy for normal circumstances, but Tejo had trained as a military medic before becoming a mechanic. He had carried wounded soldiers through burning buildings. He had learned that the human body could do impossible things when someone's life depended on it. He grabbed the beam and lifted. His muscles screamed. His back felt like it was tearing apart. But inch by inch, the beam rose. The child squirmed free, crying, clutching his injured arm. Tejo dropped the beam and scooped the boy into his arms. The breach was getting worse. The crack was spreading. In 30 seconds, the entire wall would fail. There was no time to reach the door, no time to call for help, no time for anything except one desperate choice. Tejo saw the emergency seal controls on the wall near the breach. If he could reach them, if he could activate the foam sealant, he might close the crack. But he would have to get close to the vacuum. He would have to expose himself to conditions that would kill him in seconds. He looked down at the child in his arms. The boy was so small, so scared, clutching Tejo's work uniform with tiny blue fingers. Tejo had no protective suit. He had no backup coming. He had nothing except his body and his choice. He chose. Wrapping himself around the child like a shield, Tejo ran toward the breach. The cold hit him immediately, burning his skin. The air was torn from his lungs. He could feel ice forming on his face, his hands, his exposed arms. But he kept moving. He reached the controls. He slammed his palm against the emergency button. Orange foam exploded from the walls, covering the breach, sealing it, stopping the hungry vacuum from taking them both. Tejo collapsed to the floor, the child still cradled against his chest. His body was shaking. He could not feel his hands. His vision was going dark, but the boy was breathing. The boy was safe. Somewhere far away, he heard voices shouting, footsteps running, alarms still screaming. Then everything went black. Princess Lysara ran through the corridors of the human station, her heart pounding with a fear she had never known before. Her guards struggled to keep up with her, their heavy armor slowing them down. She did not care about dignity. She did not care about royal behavior. Her son was missing, and alarms were screaming about a hull breach in a forgotten section of this primitive station. She had noticed Kale's absence only minutes ago. The boy was always curious, always wandering, always finding trouble. She had warned him so many times to stay close. But he was 6 years old, and the universe was full of wonders he wanted to explore. Now that curiosity might have killed him. Lysara reached Section D and found chaos. Human workers were shouting at each other, trying to understand what had happened. Emergency teams were gathering equipment. Nobody seemed to know anything useful. "Where is my son?" Lysara demanded, her voice cutting through the noise like a blade. A human woman pointed toward a cargo bay with a shaking hand. "In there, Your Highness. The breach has been sealed, but we do not know—" Lysara did not wait for her to finish. She ran to the cargo bay doors and forced them open with her own hands. The sight inside stopped her cold. A human man lay on the floor, curled around a small body. Orange foam covered the far wall where the breach had been. The air was thin and cold, filled with the smell of metal and chemicals. Emergency lights painted everything in shades of red. Lysara crossed the distance in 3 heartbeats and fell to her knees beside them. The human was not moving. His skin was pale and covered in frost. His lips were blue, but his arms were still wrapped around Kale, protecting him, shielding him from the cold that had nearly killed them both. "Kale," Lysara whispered, reaching for her son. The boy stirred and looked up at his mother with tear-filled eyes. "Mama!" he cried, reaching for her with his good arm. The other arm hung at a strange angle, clearly broken. Lysara pulled him close and held him tight, tears streaming down her silver-blue face. He was alive. Her son was alive. She could feel his heartbeat against her chest, fast and frightened but strong. "The human," Kale said, his voice small and shaky. "He saved me, Mama. He carried me. He was so warm." Lysara looked at the man who had saved her child. He was not moving. He was not breathing. His body had taken the full force of the vacuum while protecting Kale. She could see the damage clearly. Frostbite covering his hands and face, his skin turning colors that skin should never turn. "Get the medics!" Lysara screamed. "Now!" Her guards responded immediately, calling for assistance. Within moments, both human and Valari medical teams arrived. The humans rushed to their fallen colleague, pulling out equipment and shouting medical terms. They worked on his body with desperate efficiency. "He is not responding," one human medic said. "His core temperature has dropped too far. His heart has stopped." Lysara watched them work, still holding her crying son. This human, this stranger, had given his life for her child. He had not known who Kale was. He had not known that saving him would bring honor or reward. He had simply seen a child in danger and chosen to act. In 3,000 years of Valari history, Lysara could not remember hearing of such selfless courage from any species. "Move aside," commanded the Valari head physician, pushing past the human medics. He was an old man named Herath, one of the finest doctors in the Empire. He knelt beside the human and scanned him with advanced medical instruments. "His cellular damage is severe," Herath reported. "His brain has been without oxygen for nearly 4 minutes. By all measurements, he should be dead." "Should be?" Lysara caught the word. Herath looked at her with surprise in his ancient eyes. "There is still electrical activity in his brain, faint but present. His body is fighting to survive. I have never seen anything like it." "Can you save him?" Herath hesitated. "Our medical technology is not designed for human biology. The differences are significant. If I attempt treatment, I might kill him faster. And if you do nothing, he will die within minutes. Perhaps he is already dead. And we are merely watching the last echoes of his life fade away." Lysara looked at the human's face. He was young, younger than she had first thought. His features were plain but kind. Even in death, his arms had not released their protective position around where Kyle had been. "Try," Lysara commanded. "Use everything we have. Adapt our technology. Experiment if you must. But try." "Your Highness, the risk." "This man sacrificed himself for my son," Lysara said, her voice breaking. "He died protecting the heir to our empire. If we let him pass without trying everything in our power to save him, what does that say about us? What does that say about the Valari?" Herath stared at her for a long moment. Then he nodded slowly. "Bring him to our ship. I will need the full medical bay and every resource available." The next hours were the longest of Lysara's life. She sat in the waiting area outside the medical bay, holding Kale close. The boy's arm had been treated and wrapped. He was exhausted but refused to sleep. He kept asking about the human, the man who had carried him through the darkness and cold. "What is his name, Mama?" Kyle asked. Lysara did not know. She had not thought to ask. He was just a human worker, one of thousands on this forgotten station. Nobody important, nobody special. Except he was special. He had proven that with his actions. A human official arrived, nervous and apologetic. He explained what he knew about the incident, about how the old systems had malfunctioned, about how the human worker had been in the right place at the right time. "His name is Park Tae-ho," the official said. "He is a mechanic. He has worked on this station for 3 years. He was a soldier before that, a medical helper in your language. He has no family listed in his records, no emergency contacts. He is alone." Alone. The word struck Lysara deeply. This man who had saved the most precious person in her universe had no one to mourn him if he died. 3 days passed. 3 days of waiting, hoping, praying to gods she was not sure she believed in anymore. Herath worked without rest, adapting Valari medical technology to human biology through trial and error. Several times they almost lost him. Several times his heart stopped and had to be forced to beat again. But Park Tae-ho refused to die. On the morning of the 4th day, Herath emerged from the medical bay with exhausted triumph in his eyes. "He is awake," the old physician said. "He is weak, confused, and asking where he is, but he will live." Lysara felt tears spill down her face. Beside her, Kale jumped up with excitement, pulling at her hand. "Can we see him? Please, Mama, I want to see my human." His human. Lysara smiled at the words. In the way of children, Kale had already claimed the man who saved him. It was a bond that would not easily break. "Yes," Lysara said, standing and smoothing her robes. "Let us go see him." She walked into the medical bay with her son at her side and found Park Tae-ho sitting up in a bed too small for Valari patients. He looked confused and lost, surrounded by alien technology and alien faces. His hands were bandaged, his face still marked by healing frostbite. When he saw Kale, his expression changed. Relief flooded his features. A small, tired smile appeared on his lips. "You are okay," he said in rough, simple words. "Good. That is good." Kale broke free from Lysara and ran to the bed, climbing up to sit beside his savior. "You saved me," the boy declared. "You are my human now." Tae-ho looked at the princess with confusion, clearly not understanding what was happening. Lysara bowed her head to him, a gesture of respect she had never shown to anyone outside her family. "You saved my child," she said, her voice thick with emotion. "And I do not yet know how to thank you. But I will find a way. I promise you that." Tae-ho shook his head slowly. "I just did what was right. Anyone would do the same." Lysara stared at him. In her experience, that was not true at all. Most beings thought of themselves first. Survival was the strongest instinct in any species. But this human had proven that something could be stronger. "You do not understand," she said softly. "You do not understand what you have done, or what comes next. But you will. My father will make sure of that." Tae-ho spent the next several days in a state of confusion. He lay in the Valari medical bed, surrounded by technology he did not understand, attended by alien doctors who spoke a language he could not follow. The only things that made sense were the visits from the small prince who had decided that Tae-ho belonged to him. Kyle came every day, sometimes twice a day. He brought strange alien fruits that tasted like nothing Tae-ho had ever eaten. He showed Tae-ho pictures he had drawn with his good hand, the injured arm still wrapped in a healing cast. He chattered endlessly in a mix of his language and broken human words, telling Tae-ho about his home, his grandfather, his favorite foods, his dreams. Tae-ho did not understand most of it, but he listened anyway. There was something pure about the child's affection, something that reminded Tae-ho of a time before his life had become empty and quiet. Princess Lysara came too, though less often. She watched Tai-ho with an expression he could not read, gratitude mixed with something deeper, something that looked almost like guilt. "You are healing well," she said during one visit. "Herath tells me your body is remarkable. It adapts faster than he expected." Tai-ho shrugged. "Humans are hard to kill. We are built to survive." "So it seems." Lysara paused, seeming to struggle with her next words. "I must ask you something. Why did you do it? You had no reason to risk your life for my son. You did not know who he was. You had nothing to gain." It was a question Tai-ho had asked himself during the long, quiet hours of recovery. The truth was simple, but he was not sure how to explain it. "I was a medic in the military," he said finally. "A long time ago. I served with a unit in a bad place, a dangerous place. We were attacked, and I could not save them. My friends, my team. I watched them die while I survived. The memory still hurt, even after all these years." Tai-ho looked at his bandaged hands. "Since then, I have lived with the question, why me? Why did I survive when better people died? I never found a good answer." He looked up at Lysara. "When I saw your son in danger, I did not think about reasons. I just knew that I could not watch another person die if there was something I could do, even if that something killed me. At least then my survival would have meant something." Lysara was silent for a long moment. When she spoke, her voice was soft. "You carry a heavy weight, Park Tai-ho. Everyone carries something. Yes, but not everyone transforms their pain into protection for others." Before Tai-ho could respond, Kale came running into the medical bay with his usual energy. He climbed onto the bed and settled himself against Tai-ho's side with complete familiarity. "I escaped the guards again," the boy announced proudly. "They are too slow," Lysara sighed. "Kale, we have discussed this. You cannot keep running away." "But I want to see my human." Tai-ho found himself smiling, a real smile, the first one in years. "It is okay. I do not mind." Lysara watched the interaction with wonder in her eyes. Her son had always been friendly, but she had never seen him attached to anyone like this. The bond between Kyle and the human mechanic was immediate and powerful, as if they had known each other for years instead of days. "Tell me about your home," Kyle demanded, poking Tai-ho's arm. "Tell me about Earth." Tai-ho thought about Earth, a planet he had not seen in 5 years. He thought about green forests and blue oceans, crowded cities and empty highways, rain and sunshine and seasons that actually changed. "Earth is beautiful," he said. "The sky changes color, blue in the day, orange and pink when the sun sets, black filled with stars at night. We have mountains so tall their tops are always covered in white snow. We have oceans so deep that we have not explored them all even now." Kyle listened with wide eyes. "Can I visit someday?" "Maybe, if your mother allows it." Lysara smiled sadly. "Perhaps, when things are more peaceful between our peoples." That night, after Kyle had been dragged away to bed by his guards, Lysara returned alone. She stood at the foot of Tai-ho's bed with a serious expression. "I have contacted my father," she said. "Emperor Thalreen, ruler of the Valari Empire." Tai-ho felt a chill run through him. He had heard of the Valari Emperor. Everyone in the galaxy had. The man was ancient and powerful, a legend among his people. "Why?" Tai-ho asked carefully. "Because of what you did. In our culture, saving the life of a royal family member creates what we call a sacred debt. It is the highest form of obligation, a bond that cannot be broken or ignored. I do not want anything from you. I told you I just did what was right. That is exactly why this matters." Lysara moved closer, her violet eyes intense. "You ask for nothing. You expect nothing. In our history, every time someone saved a royal life, They demanded rewards, land, titles, political power, wealth. They used the sacred debt as leverage, but you have asked for nothing except to be left alone to heal. Because I do not need anything. You need everything, Park Tae-ho. You live alone on a forgotten station. You work a job no one else wants. You have no family, no connections, no future beyond tomorrow's repairs. You saved the only heir to the most powerful empire in the galaxy, and you ask for nothing. Tae-ho did not know what to say. She was right, of course. His life was empty. He had designed it that way on purpose, punishing himself for surviving when others had not. My father is invoking the right of sacred debt, Lysera continued. It is an ancient ceremony, unused for centuries. The last time it was performed was 3,000 years ago, when a Velari soldier saved my ancestor from assassination. That soldier was granted lands, a title, and a place in our royal court that his descendants hold to this day. I am not Velari. No. You are human. And that makes this unprecedented. No alien has ever been offered what my father wants to offer you. Tae-ho sat up straighter, ignoring the pain in his healing body. What does he want to offer? Everything. Lysera's voice was quiet but firm. Citizenship in the Empire, lands on our most beautiful planet, a title that would make you nobility, and most importantly, the position of Shield of the Crown, Kale's official protector, bound to him and our family for life. The words hit Tae-ho like a physical blow. He could not process them. This was impossible. This was insane. I am a mechanic, he said weakly. I fix air filters and water pipes. I am nobody. You are the man who saved my son. That makes you someone. Lysera reached out and touched his bandaged hand gently. I know this is overwhelming. I know you did not ask for this. But my father believes, and I am beginning to agree, that you were meant to be found. That the universe put you in that cargo bay for a reason. I do not believe in fate. Neither did I, until I watched you wrap your body around my child and run into the vacuum. Lysera's eyes glistened with unshed tears. You could not have known you would survive. You thought you were dying, and you still chose to save him. Tae-ho looked away, uncomfortable with the emotion in her voice. What if I refuse? What if I just want to go back to my station, my job, my quiet life? Then you may. My father will not force you. The right of sacred debt must be accepted willingly, or it means nothing. Lysera released his hand and stepped back. But I hope you will not refuse. Kyle has already lost too much in his young life. He has found something in you, a protector, a friend, something he needs desperately. Please at least consider it. She turned and walked to the door, pausing before she left. The fleet arrives tomorrow, she said. My father has sent his finest ships to escort us home. They come for you, Park Tae-ho. The entire Velari Empire has come to claim you. She left, and Tae-ho lay in the darkness, staring at the ceiling of the alien medical bay. Tomorrow. Everything would change tomorrow. For the first time in years, he was afraid. Tae-ho woke to the sound of alarms. For a terrible moment, he was back in the cargo bay, back in the cold, back in the darkness with the vacuum pulling at his skin. Then he realized he was safe in the medical bay, and the alarms were coming from outside. He forced himself out of bed, his body still weak from the healing process. Through the window of the Velari ship, he could see the stars, and something else. Ships. Hundreds of ships, emerging from bright flashes of light as they dropped out of faster-than-light travel. The Velari fleet had arrived. Tae-ho had seen military ships before. He had served on them, fought from them, nearly died in them. But he had never seen anything like this. The Velari vessels were enormous, their hulls gleaming with silver and gold, their weapons visible even from this distance. Each ship was a work of art and a promise of destruction, beautiful and terrifying in equal measure. A knock came at the door, and Kyle burst in without waiting for a response. The boy's face was bright with excitement. "They are here! Grandfather's fleet is here!" Kyle grabbed Tejo's hand and pulled him toward the window. "Look, look! That big one with the golden wings! That is the Emperor's personal ship!" Tejo looked at the ship Kale was pointing to. It was the largest in the fleet, its design more elegant than the others, covered in patterns that seemed to glow with inner light. On its hull, he could see symbols that he assumed represented the royal family. "Your grandfather travels with many ships," Tejo observed. "He wanted to show everyone that you are important," Kale said seriously. "Mama told me. He sent the whole Imperial Guard to escort us home. He sent the biggest fleet in 100 years. For me, Tejo thought. He sent all of this for me. It was impossible to understand. Tejo was a mechanic. He fixed things for a living. He was not someone that emperors sent fleets for. Lysara appeared in the doorway, dressed in formal robes that sparkled with tiny jewels. She looked like something from a dream, beautiful and distant and utterly alien. "You should prepare," she said to Tejo. "High Commander Vorinth is coming to greet you personally. He leads the Imperial Guard and serves as my father's voice in military matters. Should I be worried? Vorinth is traditional. He has never met a human, and he has opinions about your species. But he will treat you with respect. My father has commanded it." 30 minutes later, Tejo stood in the docking bay of the diplomatic ship, wearing borrowed clothes that did not quite fit. Beside him, Lysara stood tall and composed. Kyle had been sent away despite his loud protests. Official meetings were not places for children, even royal ones. The airlock opened, and soldiers marched through in perfect formation. They wore armor that seemed to flow like liquid metal, and they carried weapons that hummed with barely contained energy. Their faces were hidden behind helmets that reflected Tejo's image back at him. Behind the soldiers came a single figure. He was tall even for a Valari, with skin the color of storm clouds and eyes that burned like embers. His armor was more elaborate than the others, decorated with symbols and medals that spoke of victories and rank. This was High Commander Vorinth, leader of the Imperial Guard, the most feared military commander in the known galaxy. Vorinth stopped in front of Tejo and studied him with cold, measuring eyes. The silence stretched on, uncomfortable and heavy. "So," Vorinth finally said, his voice deep and rough, "this is the human who saved our prince. I am Park Tejo. I know who you are. I have read every report about you. Military service with honor, medical training, years of isolation on a forgotten station. You are either a very humble man or a very damaged one. Both, maybe." Something flickered in Vorinth's eyes, surprise perhaps at the honest answer. "My emperor has commanded me to extend the right of sacred debt to you. Do you understand what that means?" Princess Lysara explained some of it. She explained words. Let me explain reality. Vorinth stepped closer, his presence overwhelming. "If you accept this right, you will become part of our empire. You will swear oaths to our throne. You will be expected to fight for us, die for us if necessary. You will no longer belong to humanity alone. You will belong to the Velari as well." That sounds like a warning. It is. Many in our court will not accept a human holding such a position. They will test you, challenge you, try to prove that you are unworthy. Some may even try to kill you. "Vorinth," Lysara said sharply, "that is enough. The human deserves to know the truth, Your Highness. If he walks into this blindly, he will not survive." Vorinth turned back to Tejo. "Do you still wish to proceed?" Tejo thought about the question carefully. He thought about his empty life, his quiet guilt, his years of punishment for surviving. He thought about Kyle, the small boy who had claimed him as my human. He thought about Lysara, her tears of gratitude, her promise of something more. "I did not save the prince for rewards," Tejo said quietly. "I did not expect anything, but I also know that my life as it was had no purpose. If there is a chance to find purpose by accepting this, then yes, I will proceed." Vorinth stared at him for a long moment. Then slowly the commander nodded. "You speak like a soldier. Perhaps there is more to you than I expected." Vorinth stepped back and raised his voice. "Prepare the shuttle. We return to the flagship immediately." The journey to the Emperor's ship took only minutes, but it felt like hours. Tejo sat in the transport shuttle, watching through the windows as they approached the massive golden vessel. Up close, it was even more impressive and intimidating. They landed in a bay filled with more soldiers and officials, all watching the shuttle with curiosity. When Tejo emerged, he could feel their eyes on him, measuring him, judging him. But before anyone could speak, a small figure broke through the crowd. "My human!" Kyle shouted, running across the bay with complete disregard for royal behavior. He crashed into Tejo's legs and wrapped his arms around them. "You came!" "I knew you would come." The watching Valari seemed shocked. Tejo could see the confusion on their faces, this honored prince, this precious heir clinging to a human mechanic like he was the most important person in the universe. Tejo knelt down and smiled at the boy. "Of course I came. You invited me, remember?" Kyle beamed. "I will show you everything. My room, my toys, the gardens with the singing flowers, and you will meet grandfather. He is old and serious, but he tells the best stories." Lysara approached with an apologetic expression. "Kyle, we discussed proper behavior. It is proper to greet friends," Kyle said stubbornly. "Tejo is my friend, my best friend." The words struck Tejo deeply. When was the last time anyone had called him a friend? He could not remember. "Come," Lysara said gently. "My father is waiting. He wishes to meet the human who saved his grandson and heir, the human who has changed everything." They walked through corridors of silver and gold, past murals depicting Valari history, past windows showing the stars outside. Guards stood at every corner, watching, protecting. At the end of the longest corridor stood a massive door, carved with the symbols of the imperial family. Behind that door waited the Emperor. Tejo took a deep breath. He felt Kale's small hand slip into his own, holding tight. "Do not be afraid," the boy whispered. "I will protect you." Despite everything, Tejo laughed. "Thank you, Kale." The doors began to open. The future began. The throne room was the largest enclosed space Tejo had ever seen. The ceiling rose so high that clouds actually formed near the top. Tiny wisps of moisture drifting in the artificial air currents. The walls were lined with statues of ancient Valari rulers, each one frozen in poses of power and wisdom. Thousands of courtiers filled the space, standing in perfect rows, their eyes fixed on the human who dared walk among them. At the far end of the room sat the throne. It was carved from a single piece of crystal, glowing softly with inner light. And upon it sat Emperor Thalreen. Tejo had expected many things. He had expected power, dignity, intimidation. He had not expected age. The Emperor was ancient. His skin had faded to a pale gray, and his eyes had lost the bright violet that other Valari possessed. His body was thin and frail, wrapped in robes that seemed too heavy for his frame. But when those old eyes focused on Tejo, there was nothing frail about them. They burned with intelligence and authority that transcended physical weakness. Lysara walked beside Tejo, guiding him forward. Kale had been made to stay behind with the guards, despite his protests. This moment was too formal, too important for a child's presence. They stopped at the base of the throne's platform. Lysara bowed deeply. Tae-ho, unsure of the proper custom, simply lowered his head in respect. "Rise," the Emperor said. His voice was soft but carried perfectly through the massive room. "Let me see the human who saved my blood." Tae-ho looked up and met the Emperor's gaze. For a moment, neither spoke. The entire throne room held its breath. "You are smaller than I expected," the Emperor said. Tae-ho blinked. "I apologize?" A strange sound escaped the Emperor's lips, laughter, dry and rusty from disuse. "Do not apologize for your form. It is not your body that interests me, it is your spirit." The Emperor rose slowly from his throne, waving away the servants who rushed to assist him. He descended the steps one at a time, his ancient bones protesting each movement. The courtiers watched in shock. The Emperor never descended from his throne. It was not done. Thalrian stopped in front of Tae-ho and studied him closely. "My granddaughter tells me you ran into vacuum to save Kale, that you wrapped your body around him and accepted death so that he might live. I did what needed to be done. She also tells me you have refused any reward, that you asked for nothing, expected nothing, wanted nothing. That is true." The Emperor reached out and touched Tae-ho's face with withered fingers. The touch was gentle, almost fatherly. "In 3,000 years of rule, my family has received countless gifts, countless tributes, countless acts of loyalty. All of them came with strings attached. All of them came with expectations of return." The Emperor's voice trembled with emotion. "But you gave us the greatest gift possible, the life of my heir, and asked for nothing. Do you understand how rare that is? Do you understand what that means?" Tae-ho thought about his answer carefully. "I understand that I saw a child in danger. Everything else happened too fast for thought." "Exactly." The Emperor smiled, an expression that transformed his ancient face into something almost young. "You did not calculate. You did not consider politics or profit. You simply acted from pure instinct. That instinct, that willingness to sacrifice, is worth more than all the gold in our treasury." Thalreen turned to address the room, his voice growing stronger. "Hear me, all of you. This human, Park Tae-ho, has proven himself worthy of the greatest honor our empire can bestow. I hereby invoke the right of sacred debt." Gasps echoed through the throne room. Tae-ho saw some courtiers nodding in approval, but many more wore expressions of shock and anger. A human receiving such an honor? It was unprecedented. It was unacceptable. One courtier stepped forward, a tall Velari with sharp features and cold eyes. "My emperor, with respect, this is madness. A human cannot hold the position of sacred debtor. Our traditions state that anyone who saves a royal life may receive this honor," the Emperor interrupted. "They say nothing about species." "Because no alien has ever been worthy. This human comes from a primitive species. They have been part of the galactic community for less than a century. They know nothing of our culture, our history, our ways. And yet this human did what thousands of Velari failed to do. He protected my heir when Kyle was in danger. Where were the guards? Where were the security systems? Where were all the noble warriors who swear oaths to defend the crown?" The courtier had no answer. "Park Tae-ho," the Emperor continued, turning back to Tae-ho, "I offer you the position of Shield of the Crown. You would be bound to my grandson for life, sworn to protect him above all else. You would be granted citizenship, lands, a title. You would become noble in the eyes of our law. And if I refuse, then you return to your station, your life, your quiet existence. No one will stop you. The right must be accepted freely." Tae-ho thought about the question. He thought about the empty years behind him and the unknown years ahead. He thought about Kyle's smile, Lysara's tears, the feeling of purpose that had been missing from his life for so long. There will be challenges, the Emperor added quietly, so only Tae-ho could hear. There will be those who try to destroy you, to prove you unworthy. The path you would walk is dangerous. More dangerous than running into vacuum? The Emperor laughed again. Perhaps not, but longer, and with more subtle enemies. Tae-ho made his decision. I accept, he said clearly, his voice carrying through the throne room. The Emperor's smile widened. Then kneel, Park Tae-ho, and receive your oath. Tae-ho knelt on the crystal floor. The Emperor placed a hand on his head and began to speak words in the old Valari language, words of binding and promise, words that had not been spoken in 3,000 years. As the ceremony continued, Tae-ho felt something shift inside him. He was still the same man, still broken, still carrying his guilt, still uncertain about the future. But he was no longer alone. He was no longer purposeless. He was the shield of the crown. And for the first time in years, that meant something. When the ceremony ended, the throne room erupted in a mixture of cheers and angry muttering. The courtiers who supported the Emperor's decision celebrated loudly. Those who opposed it gathered in dark corners, whispering their displeasure. Lysara approached Tae-ho with tears in her eyes. Thank you, she whispered. Thank you for accepting. Thank you for giving me the chance. A small body crashed into Tae-ho from behind. Kyle had escaped his guards again and come running as soon as the ceremony ended. You are staying, the boy shouted. You are really staying. Tae-ho lifted the child into his arms. I am staying. I will protect you, Kyle. I promise. Kyle hugged him tight. I knew you would. From the first moment, I knew you were special. Special. It was strange to hear that word applied to himself. But looking at the boy in his arms, at the princess who smiled through her tears, at the ancient emperor who had given him a second chance at life, Tae-ho began to believe it might be true. The journey to the Valari homeworld would take 3 days. 3 days to prepare for his new life, to learn what would be expected of him, to understand the dangers that waited. But those were problems for tomorrow. Tonight, for the first time in years, Park Tae-ho felt hope. The Imperial Palace on Valari Prime was a city unto itself. Towers of crystal and silver rose toward a purple sky, connected by bridges that seemed to float on nothing at all. Gardens filled with plants that sang when the wind touched them stretched in every direction. Millions of Valari lived within the palace grounds, serving the throne in countless ways. Tae-ho stood on a balcony, looking out at this alien world that was now his home. 3 months had passed since the ceremony on the Emperor's ship. 3 months of learning, adapting, struggling to find his place. It had not been easy. The language came slowly, but it came. Tae-ho spent hours each day with tutors, forcing the strange Valari words past his human lips. He learned their history, their customs, their countless rules of behavior. He learned which nobles could be trusted and which wanted him dead. The enemies were many. The courtier who had challenged the Emperor on the ship, Lord Saverin, had become Tae-ho's most vocal opponent. He spoke constantly about human inferiority, about the insult of giving sacred honors to a primitive species. Others joined him, forming a faction of traditionalists who wanted Tae-ho removed by any means necessary. But Tae-ho also found allies in unexpected places. Commander Vorenth, who had once viewed him with cold suspicion, had become something like a friend. The warrior respected skill, and Tae-ho had proven his skill in the training halls. His human style of combat was different from Valari techniques, less elegant, more brutal, focused on survival rather than beauty. Vorenth found it fascinating. You fight like you expect to die, Vorenth observed one day after a sparring session. I learned to fight in places where death was always close, Teho replied, wiping sweat from his face. Pretty movements do not stop bullets. No, they do not. Vorinth handed him a water container. The trial of worthy blood is tomorrow. Are you ready? The trial was the final test. Every shield of the crown had to face it before their position became official. It was not a test of combat. It was a test of character. Teho would stand before the full court and answer questions about his life, his choices, his soul. The nobles would judge whether he was truly worthy of the honor he had received. I do not know if anyone can be ready for something like that, Teho admitted. Speak the truth. That is all you can do. The next morning, Teho entered the Great Hall of Judgment wearing formal robes that Lysara had chosen for him. They were simple compared to the elaborate costumes of the Valari nobles, but they fit him well. Lysara had explained that simplicity suited him better than decoration. Thousands of Valari filled the hall. The Emperor sat on his throne, looking frailer than ever but still commanding absolute attention. Lysara stood beside him with Kael, who waved at Teho when he entered. Teho smiled at the boy before forcing his face back to seriousness. Lord Savrin stepped forward to begin the questioning. His expression made it clear he intended to destroy Teho with words, since other methods had failed. "Park, Teho," Savrin said, his voice dripping with contempt. "You stand before this court as a candidate for Shield of the Crown. Tell us, what qualifies a human mechanic for such an honor?" "I saved the prince's life." "So you claim. But what of your past? You were a soldier, yes? A medical helper who served in human wars?" "Yes." "And your unit was destroyed. You alone survived. Some might call that suspicious." The words hit like a blade to the gut. Teho had expected this attack, but expecting it did not make it hurt less. "My unit was ambushed," Teho said carefully. "We were outnumbered and outgunned. I survived because I was in the medical tent, treating a wounded soldier when the attack began. By the time I reached the others, they were already dead." "How convenient for you." "There was nothing convenient about it." Teho's voice hardened. "I carry those deaths with me every day. I wonder constantly why I lived when better people died. That guilt has shaped everything I have done since." "So you admit you are damaged, broken, unfit." "I admit I am human. We do not forget our failures. We do not pretend our scars do not exist. We carry them because they remind us to be better." Murmurs rippled through the crowd. Savrin pressed on. "And what of human nature in general? Your species is violent, primitive, aggressive. You fight wars over resources that could be shared. You destroy your own planet. You have barely begun to explore the stars, yet you think you deserve to stand among the Valari." Teho took a deep breath. "Humans are many things, Lord Savrin. We can be violent, yes. We can be selfish and short-sighted. But we can also be kind. We can be brave. When we see someone in danger, our first instinct is often to help. Not because of reward, but because it is right." Fine words. Easy to say. "Would you like proof?" Teho turned to address the entire hall. "I did not save Prince Kale for glory. I did not know who he was. I saw a child about to die, and I acted without thinking. When I wrapped my body around him and ran toward the vacuum, I knew I would probably die. I accepted that, because in that moment his life mattered more than mine." The hall went silent. "That is human nature at its best," Teho continued. "We are not perfect. We never will be. But when it matters most, when lives hang in the balance, humans do not calculate the odds or measure the benefits. We act. We protect. We sacrifice. That is what makes us who we are." Lord Savrin opened his mouth to respond, but the Emperor raised his hand. "Enough questions," Thalreen said. His voice was tired but firm. "I have heard what I needed to hear. The Emperor stood slowly, his ancient body trembling with the effort. Every eye in the hall watched as he descended from his throne for the second time in a month. He stopped in front of Taeho and reached into his robes, pulling out a blade. The weapon was ancient, covered in symbols that glowed with soft light. The ceremonial blade of the imperial family passed down for countless generations. "Park Taeho," the Emperor said. "You came to us as a stranger, a human with no name, no family, no future. But you gave us something beyond price. You gave us hope. You showed us that courage and compassion exist in every corner of the universe, in every species, in every heart that chooses to care." He placed the blade in Taeho's hands. "With this blade I name you Shield of the Crown, protector of my grandson, defender of the throne. May you serve with honor for all the days of your life." The hall erupted in cheers, not universal, but loud enough to drown out the dissenters. Taeho looked at the blade in his hands, feeling its weight, understanding its meaning. He was no longer just a mechanic from a forgotten station. He was something more. Kyle broke free from his mother and ran to Taeho, wrapping his arms around the human's waist. "I knew you would do it," the boy said proudly. "I told everyone you were special. And now they have to believe me." Taeho knelt and embraced the child. "Thank you for believing in me, Kyle. I will never let you down." "I know," Kyle said simply. "You are my human." Lysara approached with tears in her eyes. "You asked for nothing, and now you have received everything." Taeho looked at her, at Kyle, at the Emperor who had given him a second chance at life. "No," he said quietly. "Now I have finally found something worth protecting." He stood on the observation deck of the royal palace, watching the sunset paint the sky in shades of violet and gold. His body had changed in that year, harder, stronger, trained in Valari combat techniques that blended with his human instincts. His mind had changed too. He spoke the Valari language fluently now. He understood their customs, their politics, their subtle games of power. But some things remained the same. "Taeho!" Kale came running across the deck, his 7-year-old legs carrying him at full speed. The boy had grown taller in the past year, his features beginning to show hints of the man he would become. But his smile was unchanged, bright and pure and full of joy. "What is it, little prince?" Taeho asked, catching the boy as he leaped into his arms. "Tomorrow is my speech, my first official speech to the Galactic Council. Will you come watch?" "I would not miss it." Kyle's face grew serious. "I am nervous. What if I make mistakes? What if they laugh at me?" Taeho set the boy down and knelt to meet his eyes. "They will not laugh. They will see a prince who speaks with courage and kindness. And if anyone dares to disrespect you, I will remind them of their manners." Kale giggled. "You sound like grandfather. The Emperor is a wise man. I could do worse than sound like him." The relationship between Taeho and the Emperor had deepened over the year. Thalreen often called for Taeho in private, asking him about human customs, human history, human philosophy. The ancient ruler was fascinated by the species that had produced such an unexpected champion. "Humans are strange," the Emperor said one evening. "You live such short lives compared to us. A Valari might spend a century considering a decision. Humans act in moments." "We have to," Taeho explained. "We know our time is limited. We cannot afford to waste years on hesitation. Perhaps that is your greatest strength. While we plan, you do." Tomorrow would be an important day. The Galactic Council was meeting to discuss new trade agreements, and Kale would give a short speech representing the Valari Empire. It was a formality, a way to introduce the young heir to galactic politics. Nothing dangerous, nothing complicated. At least, that was what everyone believed. The council chamber was vast, filled with representatives from dozens of species. Taeho stood in the shadows near the royal platform, his eyes constantly moving, watching for threats. Lysara sat beside her father's throne, dressed in formal robes. Kyle stood at the speaking platform, his small voice amplified by technology. "The Velari Empire values cooperation," Kyle said, reading from notes he had memorized. "We believe that all species have something to offer. Together we can build a galaxy of peace and prosperity." The words were simple, written for a child's voice, but Kale delivered them with genuine belief, his violet eyes bright with hope. Taeho felt proud. The boy had worked so hard to prepare for this moment. Then he saw the movement, a figure in the diplomatic section, reaching into their robes. A glint of metal, a trajectory that led directly to the young prince. Taeho moved without thinking. He crossed the distance in 3 heartbeats, faster than anyone expected a human could move. He threw himself in front of Kale just as the assassin's blade flew through the air. The weapon struck Taeho's shoulder, its poisoned edge cutting deep into his flesh. Pain exploded through his body. The world tilted, but he did not fall. He stood between Kale and danger, just as he had promised, just as he had done 1 year ago in a forgotten cargo bay. Guards swarmed the chamber. The assassin was captured within seconds. Kale was rushed to safety, crying Taeho's name. Chaos erupted as species that had been sitting peacefully moments before scrambled to understand what had happened. Taeho felt his legs give way. Lysara caught him before he hit the ground, her face pale with fear. "The poison," he managed to say. "Do not know what kind. Medical teams are coming. Stay awake. Stay with me." Taeho tried to smile. "Always causing trouble," he whispered. "Maybe some things never change." He lost consciousness before the medics arrived. When he woke, he was in the Royal Medical Wing, surrounded by equipment that hummed with quiet energy. His shoulder was wrapped in healing materials, and his body felt weak but stable. Kyle sat beside his bed, just as he had done 1 year ago. "You did it again," the boy said, his voice thick with emotion. "You almost died again." "I promised to protect you." "But you always get hurt doing it." Tears streamed down Kale's face. "I do not want you to die. Please, do not die." Taeho reached out with his uninjured arm and pulled the boy close. "I am not going anywhere, little prince. I am too stubborn to die." The door opened, and Lysara entered with the Emperor. Both looked exhausted, but relieved. "The assassin has been questioned," Lysara said. "He was hired by Lord Savrin's faction. They wanted to kill Kale and blame humans, destroy the alliance my father has been building." "Savrin?" "He has been arrested. His conspiracy has been exposed. He will face the full weight of our justice." The Emperor approached the bed, his ancient eyes wet with tears. "Twice now you have saved my grandson. Twice you have offered your life for his. Words cannot express what you mean to our family." "I did what was right," Taeho said. "That is all. And that simple philosophy has changed everything." The Emperor took Taeho's hand. "The galaxy is watching. News of your actions has spread to every corner of known space. A human, risking his life for a Velari prince. People are questioning what they believed about your species." Taeho did not know how to respond. He had not thought about politics or galactic opinion. He had just seen danger and acted. Perhaps that was the point. 1 week later, Kyle finally delivered his speech to the full Galactic Council. Taeho stood beside the platform, his shoulder still bandaged but his spirit strong. The boy spoke of cooperation and peace, as planned. But at the end, he added something new. "I want to tell you about my friend," Kyle said, looking at Taeho. "His name is Park Taeho. He is human. 1 year ago, he saved my life when no one else could. 1 week ago, he did it again. He asks for nothing. He expects nothing. He simply protects." Kale turned back to the assembly. My grandfather says that humans are strange. They live short lives and act without thinking. But I think that is what makes them beautiful. They do not have centuries to debate what is right. They see someone in danger and they help. Not for reward, not for glory, just because it is right. The chamber was silent. The Velari Empire will always welcome humans, Kyle declared. They are not just our allies, they are our friends. And if any species disagrees with that, they can discuss it with my shield. Scattered laughter rippled through the chamber, breaking the tension. Then applause began, spreading from delegation to delegation until it filled the entire space. After the session ended, Lysara found Teho on the observation balcony. "You still insist you did nothing special?" she asked, standing beside him. Teho watched Kale playing with children from other delegations, laughing and running without a care in the world. The future emperor, innocent and hopeful. "I just did what anyone would do," Teho said. Lysara shook her head softly. "And that, Park Teho, is what makes humans extraordinary." Teho smiled. For the first time in many years, he felt at peace. He had found his purpose. He was home.